Welcome to the Friendly Moms Club podcast with Jen and Karlee. We're the new mom friends you didn't know you needed.
We are creating a safe space to bring moms together, lighten the heaviness, and find joy in the everyday moments. Together, we will share our own experiences of being new moms while navigating the topics we wish more people talked about.
Join us every Monday to hear us skip the small talk and dive right into the uncomfortable.
Happy Mom Day, Karlee!
Happy Mom Day, Jen, and two special guests today. Well, we have a baby. I don't know if you can see her little noggin. The most important miniature guest. And then the best adult guest, we have Samantha from Bellies.
Thanks, guys. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, we're stoked. So if you are new or haven't listened to it, Sam was actually with us, episode 22, when we talked about community and how to build it and why it's important postpartum. So if you missed that one, definitely journey back. And if you do know Sam, then welcome. And if you don't, welcome anyway. So Sam, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? A little reminder to all of our mom friends.
So I'm Samantha Garcia Gagno. I always find it funny to say my married name because I'm always Garcia in my head. But anyway, I'm the owner of Bellies Inc. So we sell pregnancy and postpartum products that are focused on comfort and support. And beyond Bellies, I've been in the birth world for a decade now, predominantly working as a birth doula and also a childbirth educator. And I also do a bit of postpartum doula work. But yeah, so my whole life is all about babies and bellies and boobs. And I do have 3 of my own children. Yeah, that's my whole life pretty much.
That's so exciting. And how old are your kids again? Remind us.
I've got a 12-year-old.
Wow.
He just turned 12 last month in January. And then I have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old. So all 3 of them, this is my first year with all 3 of them in school. It feels like a whole new version of me. Like those baby years do feel far now.
I imagine it feels so weird when you hear other people talking about the baby time and you're like, baby, like I'm worried about the big things.
The problems are definitely like, I always explain like the difference that I see now between those early years and the problems that I'm dealing with now is, when it's the early years, it feels like there's so many problems. Like every day there's like all these little challenges, but none of the problems are big problems. There's just lots of little problems, not none, but for the most part. And as they get older, not as many daily issues, but the problems are bigger problems. Like they feel more serious. And, a lot of them feel like, okay, this is going to be like a foundational conversation that I'm having with my son on building who he is. Yeah. And so it's like, like, okay, I got to get this conversation right because I want him to be a good person forever. So it feels like the weight is a little heavier, but the daily struggle is less.
Yeah. Like everything feels more serious, which... Yeah, but I have heard that kids learn as much as we try to teach them by like conversation and stuff. They learn by seeing what we do. So you are a very friendly human and you're not a jerk. So I imagine your kids are also really lovely and teach. Maybe they teach, but they also treat people with kindness and respect
teach, actually.
Because of you.
My eldest, we have a jiu-jitsu place downstairs from Belly's office. People have probably felt the building shake. For when he's in jiu-jitsu, he actually has been teaching the little kids, like the 3 to 5-year-olds. So teaching runs in the blood, I guess.
That's so cute.
That's going to be so good for him too.
Yeah, he's definitely.
I feel like teaching kids is hard.
Yeah, he's my big nurturer, and he loves the kid. He loves kids so much, and it's fun like seeing the elder two like really loving taking care of young ones and taking care of people, and you're like, oh, I feel like that's me. I mean, my husband's caring too, but like that's not his job. Like this is my whole world, caring for people.
Yeah, you're a natural nurturer.
Kind of rolling into today, but I know that one of the reasons that you were interested in Bellies and Bellies community and Bellies Inc. kind of came from where you come from and in the Philippines and what you saw there in postpartum support and what was lacking here. Do you mind just kind of touching on that?
So I grew up in the Philippines. I was born there. I was raised there. I lived there till I was 18. My dad's Filipino. My mom's British. So I always sort of was in this two worlds experience. But when I saw my family or our friends have new babies, what I saw would happen was like this like extended family really coming together. And, a new baby in our family meant like we were all coming to take care of her. And of course, love on the baby too, but it didn't feel like it was only about the baby. And it really did feel like it was taking care of her. And then when I moved to Canada and I was pregnant for the first time, I didn't really have a very large community here yet. I had only lived in Canada a few years and I only knew a few people. And, that was a very interesting experience just because I was trying to figure out how to give birth here and how to do postpartum. And I was lucky that I had my mom come and stay with me for a while. But what I was seeing, I mostly relied on online groups because there was really, I didn't feel like I couldn't find anywhere in person where I could go and meet other moms that wasn't like some kind of activity. And I felt like my baby's too young to do an activity. They just lie there. And so I really relied on online groups, and what I was seeing people sharing was so shocking to me. Like, I could not believe that people were out grocery shopping on day 2. And I couldn't believe that, there was a lot of American moms, and I couldn't believe they were heading back to work after like a few weeks. And, and I couldn't believe how many people were going back to exercising so quickly. And I was like, this feels like really extreme. Like, why is everyone rushing? Like, where are all the people taking care of them? Why are they having to do all the things? And, with the first pregnancy, I thought maybe this is just because there's no options. And then when I started working with families and really started to see what people were doing to set themselves up for postpartum, I realized, there's actually a big missing piece here. And it's not necessarily that we don't have the people. It's that I feel like for a lot of families, for a lot of people, it's feeling maybe scared to ask for help or not believing when people are offering help that's actually legitimate. It's sort of like one of those things, like I always laugh when people say it's a Vancouver thing to always be like, oh yeah, let's meet up. And then like you never meet up. And like 3 years later, you see them again. Oh, we should really meet up. And
we should go for coffee.
Everyone says that.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people believe that when someone's saying, oh, let me know if there's anything I can do, I think people think that it's not genuine. And so I think there's a big part of the difficulty is not having the conversation or not having the belief to be like, hey, do you actually really mean it? Do you actually really want to help me out? Because I think the vast majority of people mean it when they say it. They just don't necessarily know what you need, and so they want you to be proactive, but that's a whole other conversation.
We have an episode on that too. Yeah, you're so right though, that even then there's this like layer of like guilt too, that people here were like groomed to believe that we should be able to do it all by ourselves and that we don't need a community, and this whole like village thing, like you don't need that. Like you have money now and you have a house and you can do this all on your own, and then people are scared to ask for help, and then they're like, well, now I'm a bad mom because I can't do this all by myself, which like is crazy. Who can actually do it all by themselves?
No. I find the focus nowadays, like in our area is, or maybe our generation, is you need to get the best maternity photos, the best newborn photos, have the nicest maternity clothes, and have this beautiful nursery, and get all the expensive stroller. Like, I feel like no one focuses on really what postpartum is and what it's going to be like. Everyone just kind of, they prepare for the very visual, like outwardly parts of it, but don't actually prepare for what you're going to experience. And postpartum is a lot, and there's things you actually need for that are more important than having your nursery done or having the nicest stroller. And I find it's just I
think also a part of it is I know y'all are younger than me, but we're all generally in the same sphere.
Yeah, we're pretty close. We're pretty close.
But I think a big part of it is because when we were sort of entering adulthood, this idea of like hustle culture was a really, really, really big thing. Like resting was a weakness, and you always had to keep going. And if you weren't going, then you're losing. And I think that sort of shifted quite a bit with people who are in their 20s now. I think now there seems to be a bit more of a balance in regards to, having time for yourself. But definitely when we were entering the workforce and entering adulthood, it was so much like having to hustle. And I think that's really leaked into postpartum, in that people feel like, if I'm not doing all the things, if I'm not, taking care of every aspect of myself, every aspect of the baby, every aspect of my relationship, every aspect of having a perfectly kept house, every aspect of having Pinterest worthy nurseries and
everything,
gadgets and all these things, that I'm not doing it right, or I'm not doing it good enough. And I think that really has a big part to do with it, is this hustle culture belief that is just so ingrained with us, because that's how we started being adults.
And then after hustle culture came like this perfect social media influencer world, where first there was the people being like, well, you have to work hard. If you take days off, like you're weak, which like I remember, and like so much of like diet culture and that too.
No
and
excuses.
Then after that
I hate
came,
that line. I have a million excuses. You want me to give you all my excuses?
Yeah, actually, and they're legitimate. And then after that comes like this whole world of people who everything is perfect on the outside, and like maybe some people's lives are actually like that, but like I doubt it.
No.
And then on top of feeling like they have to hustle and they're weak if they take a break, then everything also has to be perfect. You have to have a beautiful aesthetic home, and you have to look good, and your baby has to be cute, and you can't have dirty clothes or dandruff in your hair, like. And those two together, it's like the expectations on women, like no wonder so many of us spiral postpartum, because it's outrageous. So I don't even know if we said this at the beginning, but today we're going to be talking about postpartum. So anyways, this is just the beauty, getting into the nitty gritty here. But I think you nailed it, Sam, when you said, well, what you highlighted was like, we need community, and we need people who kind of understand us postpartum, and we don't need all the gadgets and gizmos. So we can actually just cancel this episode, and everybody can go to Belly's, and that's all you need. You don't need stuff. You need community.
I mean, get some stuff. I am a
I was going to say, you do need some stuff. Yeah. Okay, so back to the important things. So, okay, before we get into the like tips and essentials, I want to hear from you, if you have anything off the top of your head, the most outrageous thing that you've ever seen somebody either like prepare for postpartum, or the most outrageous thing you've seen on like a registry, or if there's anything that comes to mind, because I have one from in the hospital that it's kind of silly, but if there's anything.
So it was in a online mommy group, and she kept talking about how she had hired a doula, but the doula was, she got the doula for free because she couldn't afford her. But at the same time, she also talked about how she bought a like $250, what's it called, crown for above the crib. Like it's literally a crown.
Oh gosh.
So yeah, this crown that essentially like has fabric that goes down like a, like a very fancy crown.
Like a netting,
yeah,
or
whatever
something.
those things are
And
called. Over cribs.
I love an aesthetic. If you know me, you know I love beautiful interiors. So I get it, but I got so mad when she said, when this person was working for her for free, because she couldn't afford it, and then she had like this crown. So that is the stupidest thing that I've seen.
Yeah, that is pretty stupid.
I think it was about $250, and this was like 10 years ago.
That's stupid even if you have the money. Yeah. Like that is, and who knows, maybe that brought her the most joy ever, but like really, absolutely not. That is just so silly. Mine's actually similar to that.
I know.
I had two in the hospital. One, I was standing at the nursing station, and I see people coming in down the hallway, and they have the most outrageous balloons. They're like, I don't even know what they said, but they were like, those giant like foil ones. They were like even bigger than the normal ones. Like they were absolutely huge, and they had probably like 5 or 6 of them. And they're walking down the hallway, and I'm like, oh, I was like, that's exactly what you need when you have a baby, like giant balloons. And then I look over and I realized the person standing next to me was the patient who the balloons were coming for, and I was like, oh, goodness. But then The family that brought the balloons actually ended up being super helpful, and it was quite funny.
Yeah.
There was something funny about them. I can't remember like what the balloon was. I was like, okay, that's actually funny. And they were helpful. But at the same time, I'm like, what are you going to do with that? And then there was another
food brought to me. I
food,
don't want
yeah.
balloons. I want food brought to me in the hospital.
There was another patient who was leaving and she had, no joke, like 30 balloons. And they were just, normal sized balloons. But they were so excited and they were leaving with their stroller and her friend or somebody's taking a picture of her leaving the unit. And then in my head, I'm like, I really want to go film them trying to get those balloons in a car. Because I can't even get like 3 balloons in a car. So I'm like, I wonder what are they going to do? And I was like, I bet you they'll be in the parking lot. Or they had to pop them. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe they're fancy and they had a separate balloon car.
Maybe.
So,
but remember that first drive home from the hospital to your house? Where it's like,
terrified.
Don't go over 5 miles. Like,
can you imagine having balloons? The balloons going everywhere?
I guess that's extra padding.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, just a couple extra choking hazards, but yeah, maybe they're like the peanuts that you put into.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're so expensive.
Like, balloons aren't cheap to get done. Like, it's hard.
They're not.
People, and same with flowers. Like, my parents brought me flowers. They did with both kids, and they also brought me food, I should say. Yeah. And like the flowers are nice, and I had one of those tiny little foil balloons, like just a few inches.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we've kept the balloon from each time they brought us flowers. It's in the baby book, but it's just because that's what you did 30 years ago. Like, that's what someone did to them, so they felt the need to bring us flowers. But really, it's one more thing we have to carry out of the hospital when you have a stroller and your baby, and now you have a vase full of flowers.
Home delivery, at least.
Right? Yeah. Send it to my house. Like, I love you, Mom, if you're listening.
Yeah, if you're listening to this.
But it's just like, it's another thing. Like, do you really need it at the hospital?
A lot of people leave them for the staff because they're like, I don't have hands for this. So then they just leave them.
Okay.
And then we're like, this is great. I mean, they're your flowers. You're allowed to take them.
Okay.
Now that we've covered the outrageous things, what is your top tip? Like, just general tip, because we'll get into like the actual products that we all thought were number one, but like, other than don't buy a giant crown and or balloons, and don't bring balloons to the hospital. Other than that, what's your best tip for somebody who's preparing for postpartum?
My best tip for preparing for postpartum is figuring out who your people are in pregnancy. And by your people, I mean pre-book your IBCLC. You might not need them, but better to have it than not have it.
Yep. That's your lactation consultant.
Sorry, your lactation consultant. Pre-book a pelvic floor physiotherapist. Find postpartum doulas who you already like. You don't necessarily have to. I mean, it's if you want someone who's popular, you're going to have to pre-book that. But if they're not, if they have a more relaxed schedule, then at least know who your favorites are. Figure out who your 3 a.m. friend is. And what I mean by a 3 a.m. friend is sometimes in those early days when you haven't slept and you're leaking and you're bleeding and you're sweating and this baby won't go to sleep and they just pooped again and like and it's always 3 a.m. Like, it's always this time when you feel the most like the whole world is asleep. It feels like you feel like I used to just feel so alone in those moments because I didn't want to wake up my husband because he had to go to work, and so I'd feel so alone in these moments. And when you have a 3 a.m. friend who is like, when you really need them, like, don't call them all the time, but sometimes we just need someone. Great if they live on the other side of the world, so it works with their time schedule. But even still, like, you have to ask them ahead of time and say, like, listen, I need someone to have as my, like, emergency cry to friend. Can you be that friend? And are you okay if it happens at 3 in the morning? And, like, if someone asked me that, I would feel so honored. Like, to me, that's like, wow, I would love to be your 3 a.m. friend. But if you don't do these things in pregnancy, then when you're there at 3 a.m., you will never, ever think of calling them. Or you might think of it, but you'll never do it because you wouldn't dare, like, bother someone at 3 in the morning. But if you've already had that conversation in pregnancy, it doesn't feel so scary. So, like, really finding your people in pregnancy, making, like, in our prenatal classes, we actually give them a handout with all the things you need to find in pregnancy so that you already have it all set up. We even include things like find your favorite restaurants that isn't pizza. So that when you can't eat another frozen meal or you can't eat whatever, it's so that you're not always ordering pizza. Because, I mean, pizza's delicious. It's my favorite. But when you're in postpartum, you need nutritious food. So if you find like your favorite nutritious restaurants close by, it makes it easier to make those choices, right? Those are the sort of things that you need to prepare in pregnancy, because you'll never think of doing it in the moment.
It's brilliant. And you're like drowning in postpartum for most people. Even if you're so prepared and you're having a great time, like you're still so foggy because you're in survival mode. Like even if you're the happiest ever, like you're still not running on all cylinders.
No.
And I like that you say that. And a lot of the people you mentioned, you can see in pregnancy. Like you can see a pelvic floor physiotherapist when you're pregnant, even if you don't have issues, just to get to know them. Yeah. You can see a lactation consultant when you're pregnant, especially if you anticipate that you might have issues. If you have family members who had issues breastfeeding, if like anatomy wise, you're worried that maybe your nipples are flat or if they're inverted, like you can actually see them in pregnancy. And then, you're not dealing with this and learning how to do this when you're bleeding and leaking and tired and, hormonal, and
you're just so overwhelmed. Who wants to try to find a lactation consultant that has availability tomorrow? Like, when you need it, because in postpartum, things seem like emergencies. Like I need to do this now, or I need help breastfeeding right now. Right. So if you already know who's in your corner, like who's in your team, right? Like that village everyone talks about. Yeah. But I saw the lactation consultant beforehand. We had a conversation, so I knew, hey, okay, so I'm going to see you approximately 5 days postpartum. I'm going to do this in those 5 days so that when I see you, we know that you've done X, Y, and Z. And like, we had a game plan, and I felt so much better going into it, knowing that I had that. I had my chiropractor already. I had my midwife. I had all these things booked and pre-organized, and this postpartum was so much more smooth because of it.
Totally.
Like, definitely.
Like you said, and I had those friends. I had that, village set up and those people that were holding me accountable to things. And Karlee was one of them, because I was like, I want to try breastfeeding for 2 weeks and I don't want to go past that. Like, I needed someone to hold me accountable for some of my kind of boundaries and things that I wanted to do. But I didn't want to just really kill myself like I did last time trying to triple feed, and breastfeeding just wasn't working. And so Karlee, they knew the plan. And so they were someone that can be like, okay, are you reevaluating? How is it going? Like, what does this look like? What are we going to do? And just having that. So it's kind of like a 3 a.m. friend, but like a keeping you accountable.
I'm not up at 3 a.m. anymore, but you can call me. Yeah.
But check in, like your mental well-being, who's there for you. And like, are you okay? Like maybe you're breastfeeding now, but is it detrimental to your mental health? Is that okay? And so, knowing who those people are going to be is huge. Yeah.
It's the same way that like in labor, it's really hard to make decisions. So like you need to have your plan and your preferences, ahead of time. And like you need your team to know what you want. So like somebody like a doula who can advocate for you. It's the same almost postpartum. Like obviously it's different. You're not like you don't have a human literally coming out of you, but it's difficult to make any type of decision, and like it's so hard to have clarity and like true context when you're drowning or tired, and like all of the factors that you have postpartum. So it is hard, like you're foggy. It's hard to make those decisions. So when you talk to people before about like your wants and needs and what you're hopeful for, and it's a lot easier than doing it in the moment. And this makes me think of something that I have on our list, and it's setting boundaries with family and friends, which is, in my opinion, I would say finding your people is the most important, because one of those people can tell your family and friends to bugger off. But actually setting boundaries with family and friends, with like visiting, with like expectations. Like I've heard of people's family members wanting them to go to like weddings and stuff a week later, and then they're mad, like, oh, you just had a baby, like you're fine. And I'm sure you see that a lot too with like really pushy family members that just want to visit, and they don't actually, like, they're not caring for the mom the way that like you're used to in the Philippines. They're just there because they want their picture and to say that they were there. And
when I was doing more birth doula work, when I first started out as a doula, I was very much education focused, just because I thought if they know all this information, then they're going to make decisions that make sense for them. And then we'd go through the birth, and I'd realize, oh, I think I spent way too much time talking and not enough time listening to what's actually going on here. And then we'd go into their postpartum, and and I would just see them like really not doing okay. And I kept thinking, like, what is going on here? Like, there's something. And then as I sort of became more of an experienced doula, I realized that, you know, the educating part needs to happen in a prenatal class, and the time with my clients needs to be much more like, they need to lead that conversation. And so a big part of our work together, even though I'm your birth doula, a big part of our work together is actually talking about that postpartum, because, you know, there are these common threads that I see in pretty much every family, and a big part of that is the in-laws. You know, even when you get along with your in-laws so well, like my mother-in-law lives with me, I love her, but I still get annoyed and she gets annoyed with me, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're two different people. So it's sort of this common theme that I just kept seeing again and again and again. So I started having these conversations because the couples were not going to do it, because they didn't want to have the argument. And so it just became a lot of like brushing it under the rug, brushing it under the rug, brushing it under the rug. But when I would come in and I'd flat out like bring up these topics of like, what is your family's expectation of what postpartum visits are going to look like? What is your family's, you know, expectations? And then what are both of your ideas of what's actually going to happen here? And so often they found out they were so misaligned, because most families are not exactly the same, right? Particularly if there's like cultural difference, like that can be a really big thing. A lot of times these conversations would be like really hard, and there'd be lots of tears, and they'd be, you know, but every time they'd be like, I'm so glad we did that, because we needed to make it clear what, like, no one wants to
set the
upset the
expectations.
other, you know? And so when we're not willing to have those tough conversations, then it ends up becoming a big problem postpartum, or someone gets resentful, or someone, you know, like, you're not going to have it where both sides feel good if these conversations aren't happening. And if you do match, then that's amazing. But most people don't, and most families are going to need some kind of in between. And you need to figure out who's going to have those conversations. And I mean, typically, if it's your mother, you got to talk to your mother. That's another thing that I hate. Like, don't make it her problem.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, that's everyone has to deal with their own mom.
Yeah.
And you actually brought up something as well, that like you need to like figure out these things with your family members, but you also have to like discuss expectations with your partner. Like, who is going to be changing the diapers? Who's going to be doing the feeding? If we're feeding by bottle, like, how are we going to split the household tasks? How are we going to split the load of the household? And like, how are we going to deal with the sleep deprivation? Like, what is that going to look like? And because a lot of people, like, I hear really sad stories that they have a baby and like nothing changes for their partner. And then they're bitter and they're resentful. And then the partner is like, well, I don't know how to help because like, well, I don't know, I'm not a therapist, but like maybe they didn't discuss these expectations going into it. Maybe their partner's a dud. There's lots of options, but do you see that a lot in the birth prep classes?
So like a big part of our prenatal classes, I mean, more in regards to birth, because obviously that's sort of what the focus is on in our prenatal classes, but we actually make them fill out, one of their homeworks is doing this values questionnaire where they each have their own questions, and it has to do with things like, how do you feel in a medical setting? Like, because some people are like, whatever the doctor says, I'm going to do it. And other people are like, I don't trust anything that the doctor says, and I'm not going to listen. And a lot of times those are couples.
Yeah.
And so if you have two couples who are not in alignment with their beliefs in regards to how they look at medical professionals, how they feel about medicated births and unmedicated births, how they feel, like some people believe that, you know, birth is just a day that they have to get through, and other people believe it's this really major, like, life altering experience, and how you approach your birth is going to really impact how you think of that is how you're going to approach your birth, right? And so when the partners are in misalignment, because I would go to births when I was a younger doula and be like, oh, this is like, they are very different. You'll have one partner
Mhm.
going, just say yes already. Like, why are you, the doctor said, and she's like, I don't want to. And it becomes an argument between partners. So it really became my focus to focus on like the relationship in my
Yeah.
time with families, because that's what's going to show up in the birth, and that's what's going to have the biggest effect, right? So that's part of what we do in our prenatal classes, is make sure that their values are, they understand each other's values. They don't have to be in alignment, but they need to understand each other's values, and like even things like how you receive information. Some people can make a decision like that, and other people need like every bit of evidence that has ever been created explained to them. And so especially me as a doula, if I know that the partner is the type who loves like information, then I know that I'm going to have to give him a bit more information so that he feels comfortable. And it's the same with postpartum, particularly around things like breastfeeding, stuff like that, where if one partner has his really strong belief on the importance of breastfeeding and the other partner just doesn't get it, you're going to, again, have that like, back and forth, because one person might be working so hard to try to make it happen and the other person doesn't get it and just so keep saying, well, let's just feed a bottle. And when you're in the thick of trying to make breastfeeding work, even though, yes, you know that's an option, but don't say it to me. Like, I don't even want you to mention that,
Yeah, don't say the B word.
Yeah, don't say it, because that's just not where their headspace is at. But the other person thinks they're being helpful. And so it's all those kinds of discussions that we really need to be doing in pregnancy when emotions aren't as high, so that when you go into postpartum, you'll be at least more understanding of where each other's coming from. I actually even tell families to have how they say have a code word in birth. For like when you want an epidural, I think you need a code word in postpartum, because like when
I actually love that.
Yeah, because when I was first when I had my first baby, my second and third babies postpartum was much smoother, but when I had my first baby and I was trying to get breastfeeding going and all that stuff, and if I just wanted to complain. Like, can I just complain about how hard this is and how much I hate this and how much, like, can I just complain about all this? You don't need to fix it, right?
You don't need solutions all the time.
Yeah. And so if you have a code word where you can be like, you know what? Porcupine. Like, I mean it this time, get that bottle. Porcupine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the partner can be like, oh yeah, okay. She's serious now.
That's my job.
Yeah, she doesn't need me to like keep encouraging her or say nothing or whatever it is they decided. So yeah, a code word in postpartum to me makes so much sense.
So you get a code word for birth, a code word for postpartum, and you can have a code word in sex.
Totally.
You're just
code
covering
words
all
are
the bases
important.
here.
That's what we've learned.
Code words, big fan.
So that's kind of like
funny.
I guess how to prepare with your family, and kind of in the bigger sense of how to prepare with, your village and who you need. Then what about items? Like, in your experience being a doula, but then also in your business, like, what do you see? What's the actual need for what items specifically people should be preparing with?
So I think for the most part, almost everything should be purchased secondhand for the baby, except for a car seat. That's pretty much it for me. Like, when it comes to the baby, okay?
Yeah.
Because
car seat, but what about the mom?
Yeah,
we're big fans about that.
I feel like people put so much focus on the baby that I just want to touch on it, because you really don't
Screw the baby
to have brand new everything, particularly like things like clothes and stuff. Like, babies wear them 3 times.
Actually,
it's brand new
if they're lucky. If they're lucky,
really.
So
save your money, buy secondhand everything except get a brand new car seat.
Yeah,
is my
great tip.
Is my baby.
We love that. We're a big fan of the secondhand stuff.
Yeah,
Facebook
and so
Marketplace.
Many people are happy to give it away. Like, I didn't have to buy clothes for my kids for years, until they all outgrew everybody, because they're just such tall kids. When it comes to mom, I think there isn't a super extensive list, right? So if they have
no one talks about it.
Yeah, no one talks about it.
Mom just gets forgotten about because all the focus is on baby postpartum. Yeah. So that's why I was like, let's talk about mom. What does mom need?
But if you are having a vaginal birth, things that I love, number one, grab a sitz bath. You know those cheap plastic. Well, they were cheap. I always joke that like when I had my last baby, they were like $12, so they're probably $52 now. But if you go to
112,
yeah, if you go to any pharmacy, you can buy these plastic sitz baths, and you put them over your toilet, fill them with warm water, and then you can use perennial herbs steeped in, and you just sit. And so for me, I used to have it as like my like alone time, so I'd like feed
a
the
vagina
baby
bath.
totally.
Yep.
And it's like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna be having a poop soon. Like
Oh,
this
yeah.
was part of my like ritual: poop,
Warm up.
then a sits
Mhm.
bath, you know, like it was so lovely. And I just didn't like the idea of having to like this much water in a bathtub. No thank you.
Yeah.
I don't want my legs
Yeah.
cold. I just want my
Yeah.
bum and my perineum cold
Yeah.
warm.
I just yeah.
So I love
And a lot
that.
of hospitals actually give you them
Yeah.
for free. If you're having a hospital birth, you can ask for one because most of the units have them. And once the patient uses them,
Yeah, you can't
obviously
use
they're
it
not
again.
going to reuse them. So you just take it with you.
That's great.
So hot tip, ask your nurse.
Super.
But anyways,
But
next.
if not,
so
it's
vagina
like
bath.
$10
Yes.
to $15.
Yeah, it's cheap.
Like, it's not
Yeah.
much. So that with a perennial herb. And really be careful
Mhm.
with where you're getting your herbs, because there's a lot of people who just throw stuff together and they have no idea what's actually in them. So like the
Yeah.
perennial herbs that we have here at Belly's Inc. was formulated by a doctor of traditional Chinese medicine. So he really
Yeah.
put together a bunch of herbs that really help with that repair of the tissues. So just be sure you're getting it from somewhere good. Like I wouldn't personally get it.
Not an Amazon purchase.
Yeah, like there's a lot of like
Yeah.
anyone can sell on Amazon. So just be like
Yeah.
like get it from a reputable brand, like Belly's Inc.
Like Belly's Inc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I picture like
Bellies.
someone putting cinnamon in, and then you just like
What?
sitting in there after a birth. You know what I mean? Like that's what I think of when like, oh, I got this
Hopefully
off Amazon. This will be
It
great.
sounds nice though. I want one,
Tingly.
even though I'm all prepared, but without cinnamon, just like a nice
without
little
cinnamon.
vagina bath.
Okay.
Sounds great.
And
Yeah.
then speaking of that, like those upside down Perry bottles are great too. So much
Mhm.
easier to use than the ones that the hospital give. Again, we have them at Belly's Inc.
Yeah.
We actually sell it as a trio. So we have the Perry herbs, the upside down Perry bottle, and then we have our 5-pack of disposable mesh underwear, but they're black.
Wonderful. What?
And they're
you can't find those
They're
anywhere.
so soft. They're like silky, lovely, buttery disposable underwear.
That sounds
So that's a great
wonderful.
option. Like just because you bleed and like I don't know why the hospital picked
yeah.
white ones. Like
I know.
gross. Get the
know.
black ones from Belly's Inc. They're just so much more comfortable.
Well, I do know why. They're so that we can see the color of
Oh,
things.
sure. I guess
which,
that makes
like,
sense.
On every other unit, like in the hospital,
Thanks
you
for
want to
being
be
a
able to
nurse,
see
Karlee.
what's coming out of people.
Boring.
Yeah, boring. We love looking at things that come out of people.
I know.
So that
Fair
that
enough.
makes sense.
Okay.
But again, they're ugly.
They
They're
are.
the black ones.
But
way
I
more
don't.
chic.
I don't want to see like the blood
Yeah, we
leaking
don't, yeah.
everywhere. And for my,
We
you
know
know,
it's
like
blood.
my
Yeah.
incision,
Yeah.
so black.
Yeah.
Black's
From
the
a
way to go.
personal
Yeah.
standpoint.
Totally.
Yeah.
So chic.
So like really for if you've had a vaginal birth, that's like the main thing for down there. You can also get like those sit spray bottles. Those are nice, and those are just nice little extras and stuff. You do not need 1,000 cooling like freezer pads. So this is something that really annoys me about postpartum information. People only prepare freezer pads. You only
Yeah.
need to use a freezer pad day 1, maybe day 2.
Yes.
Because they are for bringing down swelling. They aren't
Yep.
for much else. If you want to heal, you actually need warmth. So the
Yeah.
cold is actually making your healing take longer. So have a couple
true.
of pads, but you don't need a ton. So like just make a few for those 2 days and that's it.
Yeah. They do feel good, but like you don't, you need warmth for healing.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right.
And then if you're
Heat up your
having
vagina.
a C-section, I think with a C-section, it's not so much about stuff like definitely the high-waisted underwear is awesome, but it's not as much stuff and more about like keeping things really clean. I don't think you need the fancy, like I know there are some companies that sell like fancy like C-section scar covers and all this. You don't need that. Like just keep it clean and dry. I always tell clients like just like lift your belly in front of a electric fan. You can also do that with your perineum. I used to stick my butt up in the air after a shower and just let it like dry up, not dry, but like like dry
Yeah.
up a little bit,
Yeah.
because that just helps things. Of course, my number one thing for postpartum is using a postpartum abdominal wrap. And, a lot of times people don't think of this as something that's an essential. And I think it's because most people think that it's sort of a product that's just there to get your body back. I do not subscribe to that kind of conversation. I am not a believer in the snapback culture, but postpartum wrapping, wrapping after birth is so beneficial, whether you've had a vaginal birth or a C-section, but definitely if you've had a C-section. Like for me, it's a non-negotiable after a C-section, and you should still really have after a vaginal birth. So, essentially the way I explain postpartum wrapping is, if you think about any time you injure your body, right? Let's say you've rolled your ankle or you've hurt your knee. What's the doctor gonna tell you to do? Wrap it with a tensor band.
Wrap it up.
Right? Yeah. Why are they doing that? Brings down swelling. It helps to make sure that it's healing properly. It makes sure that you don't injure yourself worse. And it provides support to those overstretched muscles, right? So why don't we do the exact same thing for our injured abdomen, right? So while pregnancy is a normal process, at the end, your body is in an injured state. Like it just is. And of course, different people have varying degrees of how injured their body is. But your body just did a really big thing just through pregnancy and then having to birth the baby, whichever exit they came out of. So we need to be treating it like every other injury that we have, right? So with a postpartum abdominal wrap, essentially the idea behind it and sort of our philosophy about it is, studies have shown us that in those first 8 weeks after you give birth, your body is doing the most amount of healing by itself. Okay, so what we want to, and then where you're at about the 8-week mark is where you're going to be if you don't do anything to help rehabilitate it past that. Meaning, if you do nothing else, where you're at 8 weeks is where you're going to be in 3 years, is where you're going to be in 10 years. So what we want to do is really take advantage of those first 8 weeks so that where you're at because your body's already doing so much to heal. So then where you're at the 8-week mark is so much better off. So we do this by the postpartum abdominal wrapping. So you're getting that support. You'll just feel so much better. Like I remember the first time I left my house after I had my youngest, I went to Winners, which if you know me, makes sense. I love HomeSense in Winners. It's my favorite place. But I remember walking in and I felt like my whole midsection was like jello. Like I was going to like fold in half. But when you're wearing the wrap, it just gives you this really lovely hug. And it just feels really comfortable and really supported. And then it's going to help with making sure your body's in proper alignment so the muscles heal better. Plus, our ab wrap actually comes with pelvic floor exercises. So both the ab wrap and the pelvic floor program were designed by a team of pelvic health specialists, so a pelvic floor physiotherapist and 2 pelvic health fitness professionals. And so what you're really doing is rehabilitating those muscles. So you're healing yourself from the inside out, right? So you have the external abdominal support with the internal pelvic floor healing. That's really going to make a difference to how you heal in those first 8 weeks. And yeah, you're starting the pelvic floor exercises in the first 8 weeks. And that's a really big misconception, is a lot of people think I can't do anything until I go for my 6-week appointment and the doctor gives me the all clear. And then at 6 weeks, one day I'm going to go start running.
And you're magically healed.
Yeah, like that's
from zero to hero.
Plus, if you've had a 6-week appointment, you know how little they actually do in that. They ask you how you're feeling, and you say fine, or if you're not honest, or if you're honest, not great. And then they'll be like, you look fine. And then off you go, right?
Go have sex.
Yeah. No, thank you. And so
does the ab wrap also come with like a crotch cover to keep
it away? I mean, maybe we can add it as an add-on.
I will just attest to putting the ab wrap on. It just just feel supported, because
Mhm.
you're right. It's like that Jello, like having done this so recent, you forget that they just cut through 7
Yeah.
layers or whatever it is, because I'm just so wrapped up in my baby and breastfeeding and all these things. I go to do these things. I'm picking up my toddler. My husband's yelling at me for picking up my toddler. And I'm like, oh yeah. Oh, like, and you feel these like pains,
Mhm.
and things aren't working the same way. But so then I got the ab wrap and I put it on, and it automatically, you just feel like a bit more support. Like, it is hard to
Mhm.
explain, but like you said, a
Secure.
hug. It
Yeah,
just
it feels
feels
like a gentle hug.
And if
like
you think
some. It's
about it,
just,
like,
yeah.
however your baby comes out, you have a gaping hole in your body where this baby used to be. Like, think about how big babies are, and your placenta plus all of the water. Like, all of that was inside of you, and now it's not there. And like, how is your body supposed to, shimmy on back to where everything's supposed to
And
go? Like, I feel like
100% of people will have some degree of diastasis recti, which is the
Mhm.
separation of the ab muscle. So as your belly's growing, your abdomen has to separate to make space for your baby. And everyone's got different degrees of how much that is. For the vast majority of
Mhm.
people, it should be fine. But for a lot of people, it's pretty significant. And think about our muscles stretching that much. Of course it needs support. Like, of course it makes sense, right? But you do want to be careful about what kind of wrap you're buying, because
Mhm.
definitely they're not all created equally. I think we're the only one that is designed by pelvic health specialists. But things you want to look for is make sure that it's not too tight. So, you saying, it felt like a gentle hug. That's what it needs to feel like. Just a really
Mhm.
nice supportive hug, not a tight squeeze. Because when you're doing a tight squeeze, what happens is all those internal stuff starts to push down, and when there's
Mhm.
downward pressure, then it's gonna, number one, feel really awful. And if you've got any form of prolapse, which can be quite common, you're
Yeah.
going to make your problems worse. So most wraps out in the market just focus on the midsection, and they do a tight squeeze around the belly. We're the only ones that actually support the pelvis, and our wrap is put on from the bottom up. So it
Mhm.
actually lifts everything up, which makes sure that you don't get that downward pressure. And
Mhm.
it's like very flexible, and you're able to breathe in it, and you can move around in it. And yeah, so we suggest wrapping in the first, like, as soon as you feel ready to. And in those that first week, you're doing it almost 24/7 ideally.
Mhm.
Like, that's what we recommend. And then you're gradually decreasing as your muscle strength builds up. So as you're building up with the core confidence program, you're then easing down on the wrapping, and then by about 8 weeks, you should be pretty much done. And then at that
Mhm.
point, we really recommend people go see a pelvic floor physiotherapist and see what your next steps are. Most people don't need the wrap beyond that, but some people, their physio will recommend still using it, particularly if they're doing any kind of physical activity, just in the
Mhm.
beginning while they rebuild that strength, just to protect your body and not make any more injury.
That
It's
makes
just
sense.
wild to me, because I never would have thought of any of these things. Like, I just didn't, especially in my first. Like, obviously in my second I knew a lot more, but I just didn't even prepare for me postpartum at
Mm-hmm.
all. Everything was baby. What does baby need? What is, like, I don't think I did anything for myself postpartum, which is just
I think the
crazy
only
to
Mhm.
thing
think
I
about.
had with my first pregnancy postpartum were too many freezer pads. And I think I bought some nipple soaking, like disposable soaking pad things. And
Mhm.
that's pretty much it. Like, that's all I did to take care of myself.
Yeah.
Nipple cream has been very useful to me this
Oh,
time.
yeah.
And I didn't use it in my first because I wasn't really breastfeeding. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't really working. Like, I didn't. And now I'm like, oh, this actually, like, feels
Yeah.
nice to put on. Like, I've actually been using it and needing
Yeah.
it. And so now
Just for
I
joy.
understand why people,
Use it.
yeah.
Why
Our
people
nipple
like it.
cream was actually designed. So Belly's Inc. also has a nipple cream, and it was also designed by that
Mhm.
same doctor of TCM. So we have three
Mm,
bombs. We have the nipple bomb, and then we have a pregnancy bomb, and then a postpartum bomb. And people are like,
Mhm.
"Why would you need two?" Because most people like use bio oil and just use bio oil through pregnancy and postpartum, but I'm like, you're doing your body's doing two different things. In pregnancy, your body's growing, so it needs help
True.
with the stretch, and in postpartum, your body is repairing, so it needs help with the repair. Why would you use the same? How could one product do both of those things, right? So yeah, same doctor.
It's because it's not talked about enough. People don't
Whenever
care
I explain
enough
it, they're like,
about the
"Oh,
woman
that makes sense."
postpartum. Exactly. Like, but no one thinks about it. No one's talking about it.
No.
No one is having these conversations of like what actually will support you in postpartum. And
But we all got
I
great
think we're
nurseries.
getting better at talking about like the village and like I had a wonderful group of moms who did a meal train for me and brought me so many meals and like spaced it out, and it was amazing and super, super helpful. And I think like things like that are getting better, like of not forcing your way into the house and just dropping things at the door, and like you know, things like that are evolving, getting better, but we're still not focusing on the mom. Like,
no,
you just gave birth to a child. Like, clearly you're gonna need to do some things. And well, maybe they talk about taking Tylenol and Advil. I feel like they tell you that. The hospital gave me the Peri bottle that's terrible, that like,
those are stupid.
how do you want it to spray
like
up? Like,
supplies.
It doesn't actually make sense, the ones that they give, but
I mean, they're probably cheap, so
like, I don't know. That's really all. Like,
totally.
I don't think anyone recommended anything else.
I think I did get a set of stool softeners too. That was actually quite helpful.
That's nice. That's good. That does help. Yeah. I was gonna say I want to hear your top tips for a baby shower gift for mom, but I feel like we covered so many. Yeah. Like all of the products you talked about, an ab wrap, the
Care for Down There kit.
I was like, what? That's the 3-pack with the undies. A sitz bath. Go and buy them some stool softener. But even things like giving them a gift card to go get a manicure or pedicure, or
my recommendations are
food.
Yes, food, but in a baby shower, you're not really going to give food. I mean, I guess you could give like gift cards to wherever Uber Eats or whatever. Although I refuse to pay the fees from Uber Eats, so don't even say that to me. But I actually think people need to be spending on things like an IBCLC. Like, I love IBCLCs, but even when I had my own baby, because I was always self-employed, like that is a hard choice sometimes. It's a lot of money, right? And so if a couple people put a bit of money together, like, and you get a whole an hour and a half with someone who can actually help you. And I know like the IBCLC who Karlee used, and the one who like works here in Belly's community with us, Katie, she will sell gift cards, so that's a great option. If I've had my doula services be listed as on registries, so people just emailed me, and I like made a pretty card and I like sent it out, and so they got to like add it to it. And postpartum doula hours can be paid for. Like, postpartum doulas work by the hour, right? So that's sort of an easy one to ask for, because can I have 2 hours of a postpartum doula or whatever it is. So I actually think they should be filled with services, because like we can't put like, yes, it's great to have all these professionals, but we cost money, right? When I was going to births, my fees like $2,000, like. And I still think that's underpaid, but that's a different conversation. But it's a lot when you're thinking of everything that you have to buy.
You're worth it,
and when you know that you're going to be off work and not earning as much, it feels hard to do that. And so easing it up a little bit by having services on your registry will make a far bigger impact than having another 0 to 3 month outfit. Actually, no one buys 0 to 3 months. Everyone buys snaps. 3 to 6 months. You know that? They always think, I'll buy the 3 to 6 months. Why? Everybody buys 3 to 6 months. Makes me laugh.
That's so funny.
I have to say that in this one, that's what I knew I needed to prioritize the lactation consultant, and I know it's not cheap. And so we opted to not do a few things. Like, I didn't do maternity photos, which I did it once. I don't need any more pictures of me. I hate pregnancy anyways. Like, but they're very expensive to get done. And I was like, that money that I'm going to spend on pictures, I'd rather spend on that. We didn't set up the nursery. Like, we're using everything secondhand that we used with my first. We're not buying anything brand new. Like, we haven't gotten anything because I didn't want, like, I knew that my priority was on that and doing pelvic floor therapy, chiro, all those other things that cost money. And once you know the benefit of them and how much they can be a game changer, that it's worth it to spend the money on it. But when you've never used them, it's hard to be like, $200 to have someone come to my house to talk about
And
breastfeeding. Like, that just seems...
I think it's also important to like put it into perspective, right? Like I love comparing people's thoughts on service costs in birth and comparing that to a wedding day. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Because like I remember when I was a newer doula, and I think at that point I was probably charging maybe about $950 or something, and my friend who was planning her wedding said it was like, oh, how much do you like, what are you charging now? And I said, oh, $950. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's so much. And then she started talking about her wedding, and she said oh, I hired this great DJ, and his rate was something like $1,200 or something like that. It was more than what mine was. And I looked at her and I said, how much do you think your DJ would charge you if he had to first spend about 6 hours with you before the wedding, and then you don't know when the wedding date is actually going to be, and you don't know if he's going to need to work for 3 hours or if he's going to need to work for 30 hours? How much do you think he'd charge at that point? Right? And it's like we put so much we put so much focus on weddings and having these big, beautiful days, and it's one day. And it's also one day giving birth, but
sometimes more.
But what's going to have an actual impact on your life going forward? You know, like really think about it, right? What is actually good? What are you going to, when you're 90 years old, maybe you might think of your nice wedding day, but you're probably also going to think about your birth. And, you know, I was home this Christmas visiting my family in the Philippines, and my grandma's not doing very well. And so she doesn't remember very much stuff. So her childhood house is now actually a museum, because the house that she grew up in is the oldest dated house in the Philippines. So they turned it into a museum. It's pretty cool having a family with like all this.
That's pretty cool.
So I brought the kids to see the museum. Then I went and I visited her, and I said, oh, I brought the kids to Zulueta, which is what they used to call the house, because that was the street it was on. And she'd go, oh, I grew up there. And I said, yeah. And then I want to bring them to Renudo, which is my great-grandmother's house, which is still standing. And she was like, oh, I gave birth in that house. And like you could just see, like, I gave birth in that house to your Tito Chris. I gave birth in that house. And she goes, and the rest of them I wasn't allowed to. I had to give birth in the hospital. And that was a time when everyone was being put to sleep, twilight time.
Yeah.
And you can see the difference when she was talking about the birth that she loved compared to the birth that she was disconnected from.
Yeah.
Because of twilight sleep, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, so she doesn't remember very much, but she remembers that, right? So we need to we need to remember these days are important, not just the birth, but the postpartum. Like how you start off your parenting journey is going to have an effect on how you go on to parent in the long run. And we want people 100%. To be starting off feeling like they matter and like their word is important and that they are capable. You know, like so often we just infantilize so many pregnant families. It drives me nuts. Like they're not stupid. They know what they want. They know what's important to them. You just have to stop and ask them questions and like learn about them, and that's what makes a difference when families look back on their experiences. Was I heard? Was I respected? Was I loved? Was I cared for? And if all those answers are no, then I would imagine that the rest of your parenting probably feels not quite as confident as if you start in a different way. And then even just with that conversation in regards to the marriage and birth, I think a big part of it as well is that we just don't, like, this sexism. Like we just don't, it's just not
value
important.
Women the same way. Yeah.
We don't get to show off our birth. We get to show off our weddings.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, of course.
And it's just a thing. Everyone, like so many women do it. Like it's not a big deal. It is a big deal. Just because lots of other women do it, it's still a big deal, right?
Even if you do it 10 times, it's still a big deal every single time.
And so like really being able to sort of shift your view on the services that are being offered. Why don't we deserve to be paid as much or more than a DJ?
Well, you do.
Right?
You do. Yeah.
And not to like downgrade a DJ. A great DJ at a wedding is important. But
yeah, but they're working for what, 6-8 hours?
Yeah.
It's very different, and they're not on call, and
Mhm.
you don't. Yeah, that's pretty wild
how
when
much
you
do you
put it that way.
pay your
That like,
plumber, right? Like, yes, very important
yeah,
also. But like, why aren't we in part? And part of it is because the maternal world is female dominated.
mm-hmm,
Most doulas are female presenting, or female or
mm-hmm.
consider themselves women. Most IBCLCs are women. I think that has a big part to do with it.
And even that, like, women's health is not
As important.
valued the same way that men's health
Totally.
is, because the good old patriarchy,
Yeah.
like, and yeah, the amount of men that I've heard say that, like, oh, well, like, why do you need that, or why do you need those the special underwear for postpartum? Don't you have underwear? And I'm like, you, like, I'm having a human come out of me, and then I'm going to heal from that, and you're telling me that I can't have the fancy underwear that's disposable.
Yeah.
But I just, obviously my husband let me buy whatever underwear I wanted, because he's probably scared to make suggestions like that in and around the birth time. But yeah, the good old patriarchy. Gotta love it. Well, actually, I hate
no,
it,
we can
yeah,
easily
you know,
hate it.
yeah, screw it.
We just did family photos yesterday, and I wanted to do family ones to, like, it's a huge different family change for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed to breastfeed at one point, and she's like, "Oh, I want to take pictures of you breastfeeding." And it's nothing that I ever would have thought of,
Mm-hmm.
but I told my husband today, I'm like, I'm actually really glad that she got pictures of that, because it was something I've worked very hard to do, and I don't think anyone would have, like, I never would have thought to capture that. And it's not like my husband's taking photos of me breastfeeding, and like,
and
that's
if he
not
was,
something
it
that I
be
think
a very pretty one.
No, be the worst.
it would not be.
photos.
I'd have 5 chins and like be like, it would not be good. But I'm so excited to see these photos. But I think no one really prioritizes the special bond in those moments. And like, I'm so excited that that's going to be captured forever, and to be able to have that moment, because it does matter, and it does impact. Like, my breastfeeding journey has impacted my postpartum greatly. And it's just really cool to have that captured. But I just don't think that no one thinks about that, or it's just not as important, right? Like,
we're just the vesicles and the milk makers.
yes.
That's it. We're just supposed to be here and look pretty,
and
not complain. Yeah.
Smile.
It sounds like I got that. Yeah. Oh, smile, of course, and be nice. Yeah. Oh man. Oh, when people tell you to smile, piss me right off. I was gonna say something. Oh, when we were talking about services for postpartum, you know how on like wedding registries, because everybody thinks buying wedding gifts is like the most important thing in the world, so you can have matching towels in every room of your house. Anyways, you know how you can put on, I can't even remember what it's called, like the honeymoon, like fun type things where people can just like donate money to your honeymoon. Like, I wonder if baby registries, I haven't seen that before, but like a little fund for whatever service the mom wants, whether that's services, a babysitter for her older kid so that she can, spend some time with baby, if it's house cleaning, or like whatever the mom wants. I don't ever see that, so maybe we need to change that, because
I wonder if that's offered like as a line item on like baby list or whatever.
If not, we'll have to start an app.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm not techie enough for that. Editing the podcast is my scope of techiness, so
I think we covered a lot.
Actually, I have a question before we. Well, I have two. One is the like traditional like binding, like postpartum binding that's in, like, I want to say, like in Eastern medicine. Is it Ayurvedic medicine? Is that the same thing as like the principles of the ab wrap, or is that
it is
different?
Similar principles, which I think is pretty cool. Like, so postpartum wrapping or binding is a practice that is shared in most parts of the world, like all over the world, and they didn't tell each other about it. Like, they just did it. Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's probably for a reason, right? So in the Philippines, it's not as widely known, but it is also part of a lot of areas in the Philippines in our culture. It's most widely known as a Indonesian practice. So bengkang belly binding is probably the most popular one, but they do it in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in China, in Japan, in India, in South America. So it's really pretty in the Middle East. So it's really a pretty widely practiced thing, and it essentially works with the same principles. And like I know sort of the a lot of the Indonesian and Chinese is similar in regards to the warmth being the healing part of postpartum. And so when you're wrapping, you are able to keep the warmth in your body, which will then help with the healing.
With healing.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. And also just to clarify that the ab wrapping that you're talking about is not at all the same as what was that stupid word? The thing we
waist trainer.
Waist trainer.
It's not a
completely
waist trainer.
Different, and it has nothing to do with
when I bought
the way you
I
look
actually
and
bought
the way
Belly's ink from someone else, and when I bought the business, I was like, how? Because the person I bought it from, her name's Kim Vopney. She's really amazing. If you don't follow her, she's the Vagina Coach on Instagram.
Oh, I didn't know that's who you bought it from.
So Kim's
that's
one
so
of the
funny.
original designers of the ab wrap, and she's one of the original owners. And Kim and I have known each other for a decade now. We used to run these. They were called birth talks. So we'd host these pregnancy night, these birth talk nights about every couple months, and we'd have 3 different speakers. So we called them the TED Talks of Birth, and they were these great events. Cute. And we really love them, and I really miss them. But that's how we became friends, and she actually grew up for part of her life in Indonesia, so she already knew a lot of those postpartum practices just from her time living there. And if you've seen Kim, she's very fit, right? She is a fitness professional. And when I was purchasing it, I was like, if people I am a plus size mixed race person, I do not see myself at all in this, I'm not a fitness, I do go to the gym, but I'm not a fitness enthusiast. I go to the gym because I know it's good for my heart, not because I enjoy it, that's I've just never enjoyed. And I was like, how am I going to buy this product when I don't fit that? I'm not a skinny person. I never bounce back. I keep moving forward, and then as I was really learning more about the product, and I had already been referring my clients to it, but the more I learn about it, the more I realize it really is not about, it's not an aesthetics thing. And it's really more about having a holistic approach to your postpartum recovery. And while I may not be a fitness professional, what I am is someone who has a very deep understanding of families' needs in postpartum, and women's needs in postpartum. And I knew that I could really sort of shift the narrative quite a bit more so that it wasn't just all about aesthetics. Can it help with if that's important to you? Yes, it can, because if your body is healing properly, and if your if your muscles are healing properly, and everything's working properly, and you start rehabilitation earlier, of course it's going to have a positive effect on the aesthetic. But I'm not focused on the aesthetic. I'm focused on functional healing, so that when you want to go jump on a trampoline, you're not going to piss yourself, so that you can laugh out loud and not have to worry about it. I don't think it's a funny thing to be doing that when, just because you gave birth. And I truly believe that when people are able to do the wrap and do the exercises, that you're going to be better off at the end of it. It might not solve all your problems. Different people have different degrees of how much rehab they need, but it's a really great start. And yesterday I was talking to a counselor as well, and I was saying the thing that I love most about Bellies and our product, the ab wrap mostly, we have other products, but our main product is the ab wrap, right? But what I love most about it is that it just gets people to take a few moments to take care of themselves every day, because I remember being in my postpartum where I didn't think about myself at all. I just thought of this baby, and my whole world was just focused on this. But when you have something like the ab wrap and the core conference program, and you're able to spend just a few minutes every day taking care of yourself, focusing on yourself, then it gets your parenthood started in a place where you matter too. So that as your baby grows, your version of parenthood always involves taking care of yourself, because you did that from day one, right? And maybe that sounds well, that's a lot to say about a product, but I really believe that people who are choosing to incorporate it into their postpartum are doing it because they want to keep themselves a priority as well. And that's why I love it.
I love that. And like you learning to, not even learning, but like keeping yourself a priority is also going to completely change the way that you parent and show up in your relationships. Like I struggled a lot with resentment in postpartum. Like that was like my main, not hormone, what's the word? Emotion postpartum. And it was because I wasn't prioritizing myself or taking care of myself. Like every ounce of my energy was towards the baby, and then also like taking care of the house, that like I was filled with like rage and resentment because of that. And I think back, like if I had something that, as silly as like an ab wrap might seem, something like that was like a physical reminder every day that like I also matter and that I can put myself first, it like those little things compound, and then all of a sudden you don't hate everybody and you're not screaming at everybody, and then you feel good, and then you're not pissing yourself and you're on top of the world.
Exactly.
Then you smash the patriarchy. Really, it's the solution to all of our problems.
Will solve all the problems.
It will. Ab wrap for presidency. Actually. So tell us a little bit about what a postpartum doula is and what they do and what their like scope and role is and how to put one on your baby registry.
Yeah. So I think most people are pretty familiar with the birth doula and what birth doulas do. And some birth doulas will also do a bit of postpartum. But there are doulas who are really just focused on postpartum, or at least provide sort of slightly different services to what you would get in a postpartum visit with a birth doula. So a postpartum doula is really there. I kind of just explained it as while you're caring for your baby, they're caring for you. So
that's nice.
It's really taking care of all those, like pretty much everything in those early weeks. And a big component of it is of course the emotional side of things. When you have a postpartum doula, it's really like having someone there who, it's like having a really good friend with you, but they really understand it. Like they actually know what's going on here, and like there's a professional background and knowledge base to go along with it, and they've probably heard it all as well, so they're able to really listen to your story through a different scope. And really, if you have questions, like they're really able to answer a lot of those questions in regards to your birth and postpartum, just because of the knowledge base that we have, right? So that emotional, that conversational piece is a huge piece for a lot of new moms. And then we also do like more practical things too, right? So it's things like meal prepping or holding the baby so you can, like making you a bath and then you go and have the bath, or changing your sheets, or like doing light housework. Like it's essentially like managing your day-to-day life, or managing your life so that you can really just focus on yourself and focus on your baby. And in times when you just want to focus on yourself, then they're there. You're able to give your baby to somebody who is an expert in this, right? So who you trust and who knows what they're doing. Because I know in those early days, it's really hard to hand your baby off to anybody because you're hiring this doula. There's just this sort of automatic trust that kind of comes with that, which is pretty great. So they're really just there to fill in a lot of that. A lot of postpartum doulas also do overnight shifts, so this is great for catching up on sleep. So like what a night shift might look like is typically the doula will have the baby and will do all the baby care, and if you are bottle feeding, then they will bottle feed the baby so you can sleep all the way through. And if you're breastfeeding, then I essentially just bring the baby to you so that you can maybe sit up on your bed. I can help you with breastfeeding. Most of us have a pretty decent amount of knowledge in regards to breastfeeding support, or pretty significant amount of knowledge in regards to, we're not IBCLCs or anything like that. But we can handle most situations, or more common situations. And so we just bring the baby to you, you feed, and then you get to give the baby back, and then you go back to sleep, and then we will do the rocking to sleep and the changing the diapers. So it's really great for families who just need a little bit of extra sleep as well. So that's what nighttime doula does. So it's really just taking care of the whole family, not just the mom, but the dad too. And if there's older siblings, and sometimes that's included too. You're not leaving the children with us. Like, we're not nannies. We're not there to take care of your children. We're there to take care of you. So, really think of it in that way. Like, we're there to help out with the older kids too, but our focus is on the moms.
It sounds like if everybody pictured like what they want, either their mom or their mother-in-law to like be the most perfect angelic version of themselves postpartum, but then you take away all of the opinions and the unsolicited advice and baggage, and it's just like this beautiful, nurturing person that like really has only your best interest at heart. Like that's what it sounds like. You know, it's like it's the dream.
I did a video of a postpartum shift that I did like back in November, maybe early December, and it like kind of blew up because I think people were kind of shocked. And literally all I did, I came in, I made her a bath while she was feeding the baby. I grabbed the baby so she could have a bath. I put the baby to sleep. I put the baby down. I folded laundry. I meal prepped a bunch of breakfasts for her. Like I did like little egg sandwiches for breakfast. I changed her sheets. She came out of the bath. She fed some more, and then I left. And like when you break it down like that, it's like, okay. But people
that must have been
flipped
huge
out.
for her.
She loved it.
Yeah.
But people flipped out because it's all those little things, right?
Yeah.
And as moms, our brain is filled with all those little things that nobody else thinks about. And when your postpartum doula comes, she gets to take over all those little things. You don't have to think of that. Right? Like that's a big deal.
That's a huge deal.
Yeah.
And then your baby's there in their secondhand outfit that you paid $250 for instead of $27 for one t-shirt, and there you go. There's part of your payment towards the doula. Totally. But yeah, I think we solved the mystery of postpartum. And it's not a baby registry with everything on it. No, I mean that, you know, some people do want that, and that's okay too. Totally. Like if there's things you really want.
If you really want that crown, great. You get that crown.
You get that crown. Yes.
No judgment,
and those balloons.
Promise.
Yes. No
Just
judgment.
make sure you're also getting things that are very helpful for your postpartum.
Yeah, for sure. And you can't rely on you can rely on your family, but like you need to have those conversations with people before. You can't just expect that people are going to be there and support you if you haven't talked to them about like what their role is going to be and what your role. Yeah.
You know? We do have to do a bit of lifting in regards to asking, right? Because people will offer, but unless you actually follow up that offer with a, can you come at this time? That offer means nothing. And so, you know, we'll hear people say like, where is that village? I'm like, well, you kind of have to like ask them to come.
One thing that we always say to people is that if you're offering to help, like it's helpful for somebody if you can give specifics, but then also putting that on us as well, that like when people are offering help to us, like we need to start actually having like quick, easy, tangible things that we can say, like, hey, can you come take my toddler to the park for half an hour? Can you drop dinner off? Can you drop groceries off? Like we need to also have the things that we ask.
Michelle, who I teach with, Michelle Tiliakos, one of her most popular lines is, if in doubt, ask for toilet paper. Because we'll always need toilet paper.
You always will, yeah.
And
I love it.
And the person on the other end will feel really good because they just helped you out of a really messy situation. And it was only, and that line used to really work until COVID happened. And then her friend, her client asked for toilet paper, and she went to the grocery, and she's like, oh my God, there's no toilet paper. But now things are
backfired.
Always toilet paper.
Phew, dodge that bullet. Phew. So now what you're saying is we all need to just have spare toilet paper in case somebody asks for it, and then you just drop it off. Anyways, that wraps it up. Get it? Wraps it up.
Like it.
Nailed it. So good.
Super.
So before we wrap it up, do you want to just tell people where to find you, where to find your lovely products?
So our products can all be purchased online at belliesinc.com. So if you're local to the Pitt Meadows area, like if you're easy drivable, you can pick local pickup in our Bellies community space, which is right in Pitt Meadows. So yeah, that's belliesinc.com. We also have a pretty fun Instagram page. So lots of really great informational videos, videos, you'll see my face a lot. So if you did not like me at all during this podcast, then don't follow us. But if you were okay with me, then it's got some pretty good information there. And then again, if you're in the general Pitt Meadows drivable area, our community space has a separate website. So that's belliescommunity.com. It also has a separate Instagram page where we post all of the events that are coming up. But essentially things that you can find at Bellies Community is our My Powerful Birth prenatal classes, which I teach in person here at Pitt Meadows. We have our kinship postpartum group once a month. We have prenatal yoga, which has been so popular. We keep having to add a second series, a second group, which is super great. We love Sky, who's our prenatal yoga instructor here. And we also have Baby and Me Yoga, which tends to have space. So I'd love to get those classes filled. It's a really lovely class. And if your baby's a little bit older, it's okay. It doesn't need to just be crawling babies. We're a bit more flexible with that now. And then we have our breastfeeding prep class with Katie from Simply Nourish. And that's also by donation. So it's a super great class, and a bunch of other classes along the year. Like we have CPR coming up. And so there's lots of stuff coming. We had like pregnancy massage, and lots of great classes that come up. So all that information is on our Instagram page, Bellies Community, or our website, belliescommunity.com.
Wonderful. And we will link it all down below because, lots of good stuff.
Thank you.
So go buy your mom friend something nice. And that's it. That's a wrap. That's going to be my line for the rest of the episode. So thanks for listening. And Sam, thanks so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. We enjoyed having you.
Thank you.